A very good morning to you. Welcome to the Morning Brief right here on Channels Television. I'm Jeffrey Ozong. It looks like Bukola and I had a late night conversation. Kyrie missed the memo.
You didn't send me the mail. What happened?
This was your, I can't remember the last time I wore this shirt. That means I'm going to make money today, right?
Oh, please don't be alone on that one.
Royalty.
Yeah.
Good morning. It's a Friday edition of the program, guys. What's going on?
Yeah, Friday always has a different feel, and it's taking on a life of its own already. Thank God it's Friday. Welcome to your perfect morning starter. On Channels TV, I am Bukola Koka.
And I'm Kaido Kikiolu. What a week it has been here in Nigeria, politically speaking, economically, and of course, security-wise. And we're starting off with security. Early yesterday, news started trickling in of a terrorist attack on Beni Sheikh in Borno State, particularly on soldiers of the 29 Task Force Brigade Operation Hadin Kai. Well, sadly, we now have confirmation that indeed that attack happened, and there are concerns about the fate of the brigade commander of that 29 Task Force Brigade Operation Hadin Kai. Well, the location is in Beni Sheikh. It's a town really between Borno and Adamawa State, but in Borno State. It's in local government there in Borno State, and it is such a sad attack to see our soldiers killed in such manner. Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu has released a statement where he described the fallen soldiers in Beni Sheikh as our unforgettable heroes, and he urged Nigerians to stand with the military. The president expressed his heartfelt condolences to the military and the families of the soldiers, urging them to take heart in the face of the unfortunate loss. Now we must properly situate this. This is not the first time that Beni Sheikh has been attacked. In 2013, a lot of Nigerians might remember that massacre by Boko Haram in Beni Sheikh, where commuters, CJ, the civilian joint task force members and others were killed by Boko Haram. Originally, the death toll was put at below 100, but eventually the death toll rose to 140 plus. That was in 2013. In 2015, there was suicide bombings as well. So when people say that it looks like we're back to the pre-2015 terrorism era, these are the facts that they point to. These are the facts, the same place, but this time, soldiers, the very peak of our protection, of those who protect our territorial integrity, soldiers were killed in such manner by terrorists. I mean, the videos that have come out of that place are really sad videos. So the point is, what is going to be done now? Yes, the government has said it's pre-election, these things happen, so we know these things happen. Why aren't we staying ahead of it? And believe it or not, very soon politicians will switch into full campaigning mode. But these are the real issues. This is what will sell or not sell this government to the people. And it's really sad. Our hearts go out to the families of the soldiers who were killed. But it shouldn't just be condolences. It must be justice. Ensure that this does not happen again, guys.
Yes, indeed, and the defense headquarters confirmed the attack and the casualties which occurred in the early hours of Thursday, according to the DHQ's explanation. And of course, it said further that the insurgents attempted to breach the facility's defensive perimeter, but were repelled by the troops. And the soldiers responded with exceptional courage, professionalism, and superior firepower, forcing the attackers to retreat. However, the military confirmed that a few soldiers were killed during the encounter, but did not disclose their identities. But let us reiterate that this is not the first time that the insurgents are attacking either installations or a garrison or a troops location, either through ambush or direct affront on installations, and then some of our soldiers in the encounter take the fall for it. It's understandable also that the DHQ will not naturally disclose numbers, but the concern is increasing, and rightly so, that two many of our soldiers are taking the fall for it. If the DHQ does not disclose the numbers, because as much as this is, according to the security experts, an asymmetric warfare, it's also a psychological warfare. So numbers will not be disclosed in order to, boost the morale of the soldiers at the battlefield, and just keep the tempo up. But what is the authority, what is the Ministry of Defense, the Bola Tinubu administration doing to ensure the protection of our soldiers, to ensure that they stop falling at the battlefield, and to ensure that this, fight against insurgency is being won rather than being lost, on the Nigerian side, because it's like a war that has not been declared, but evidently Nigeria is at war. And so these men have families back home who have been left behind with a promise of return, but increasingly they take the fall for it. And it is really, really sad. Nigerians are getting more worried than ever before of their security, of their fate each day. But what is the administration doing about it? Rather than, the usual rhetoric of Nigeria is one, Nigeria is stable, what exactly, are the measures that have been put in place? Where is the accountability as far as funding allocated to the defense? Where's the justification for that expenditure? We must continue to ask these questions. What is the strategy, deployed to this warfare? Where is technology deployed to this warfare to ensure that we lose less men at the battlefield? We must continue to ask these questions. It is really sad that yet again we have lost generals who have spent years training, and of course this is a loss to the rank and file of the military as they continue in the battle against insurgency. And we can only condole with their families at this point in time, but we must continue to demand protection, safety for our men at the battlefield. And let's just say that we appreciate their efforts, how they continue to pay the ultimate price time and again to keep us safe. Guys.
I always reference Section 14 of the Constitution. The day Nigeria will change is the day the leadership, I don't care which leadership, will begin to put significant value on lives. We're not there. We've never been there. I don't know. I was born in the 80s, so I don't know whether before the 80s there was something like that. The pilot who went on a combat mission in Iran, and when the incident happened that everybody was looking for him, the Iranian government or the Revolutionary Guard were looking for him, the American government were looking for him. Just go online and Google how much America spent to get one pilot out to rescue him. Then you understand what I'm talking about. Millions of dollars was spent to make sure that that guy came out alive and not to be taken by the Iranian. That is when those things gives optics to the fact that we value every one of our citizens, whether soldier or civilian. But for us, it's a different matter altogether. Guys, while that is going on, the Catholic Bishop of Kontagora, yesterday I saw a message, more like a release from them, where they're talking about the incident that transpired in Debe, in Shanga local government area, Kebbi State on Easter Sunday, that's the 5th. But the most important part of what they were saying is that the number of casualties recorded in that incident was 24, as against what the police reported to be 4. Oof. And then they said they have the names, and it's across Christians, Muslims, traditional worshippers, destruction cuts across churches, mosques, and all of that, literally seeking for support because they're overstretched, because they had to take these people in to take care of them. So that's from the Catholic Bishop of Kontagora, Catholic Diocese of Kontagora, because I think it covers Niger and Kebbi. So everywhere you turn, you know why I have to bring this up? On one hand, they say they have the numbers. While initial report from the police indicated that only 4 persons were killed, we wish to clarify that the confirmed number of fatalities is 20. Police confirmed 4. We wish to clarify that it's 24. And they, of course, because it's a church, a religious organization, they'll do what they can to support the people. So that's the letter right there. we we cannot continue like this as a country. That's why I'm very, as a person, this is me as a journalist who wants to do my job. At this point in time, I just hate it that we're discussing faction APC, okay, not APC, faction PDP, faction ADC, what was it, Labour Party, faction. Right now, I want to be asking questions about if Bola Tinubu has failed to provide security for the Nigerian citizen, which other party, which other person within those parties are you going to look at as an alternative? Is Bola Tinubu has failed to provide quality lives for the people? Because his argument is that the macroeconomics precedes the microeconomics. You know, this will take time to compound to the person on the street and every one of us. But if the judgment of certain people say, no, it's not true, we don't believe in it, what other alternative can we speak to? It's not just about an alternative. What is the alternative? You're going to take out subsidy. The shortfall or the monies that government is now using to do whatever it is they are doing, how are you going to make that money and still be able to pay for that subsidy? So there are questions I want to ask, guys. There are questions, economic questions, questions around national unity, questions around national security, questions around some of the infrastructure we talk about. Not who is this faction, what is that faction? It's just a big distraction. And the other day we took up the president and said, you say you provide electricity. Well, I'm sorry, you haven't done that yet. And that's you gave that as a premise for you to be re-elected. So if the elections happen today, you're meant to lose that election. But that's on one hand. Those who are saying they want to come and take power from him, what plan do you have besides rhetorics to be able to provide these things? So I can go from security to economy to power to unemployment to, there are so many things we should be talking about, not this, you know, everyday faction. So my heart go out to our soldiers who put their lives on the line, our citizens. I don't even know how people live. I don't know whether you guys have sat down to say, in parts of the north, how do people live? If small riot happens in this Lagos, this is our small Lagos, just riot happens in this small Lagos right now, everybody will be uneasy. Everybody will be uneasy. There will be advisories here and there. So imagine that every day of your life.
There's uncertainty in the air.
Every day of your life. You're only sure that you went to sleep. You're not guaranteed that you wake up. Every day of your life, you're living on the edge. What kind of life is that?
So you can better imagine, or maybe not, the situation of the people in Beni Sheikh, for example, where we just had that attack. I should say again, it's a community between Borno and Damaturu, right? And Damaturu, that's Yobe State. And this is a community that had gone through this before. In fact, the governor had said, you know what, let's build structures, ensure the people return. And here we are again. I think the more we try to put ourselves in people's shoes, the better we're able to approach these issues. And it's understandable if it's tiring for you, having to hear these things time and again. It's like every day comes with a new security report about killings and all of that. But this is a time where we cannot give up. So we have to put the feet of government to the fire, call them out, provide support for our security agencies, a lot of them putting themselves on the front line, and ensure that wherever there is corruption, we must plug those holes, because we've heard narratives around monies budgeted for these security forces to maybe fuel their tanks, ensure they get the proper kits. The monies don't get to them. Some of them say they even have to buy, you know, their own gear. But that's where we're at today, but this is not where we should be. We'll have more for you on the program. What's on the front pages? That's where we're headed to next. Stay with us.
Welcome back. Let's bring in Mr. Dayo Akintobi. He joins us right here in our Lagos studios. Mr. Akintobi, good to see you. Looking very athletic. I'm not sure what you're trying to do.
It's Friday.
You look all useful on the low end, and then a bit clerical.
Somebody accused me the other day, said, why do you dress like a pastor? Are you a pastor? I said, not yet. Maybe in my retirement, yes.
Is that a retirement plan?
Possibly.
Good plan.
Good morning, Nigeria.
Good morning. I wish we can just continue laughing, but some of the headlines leading with things that is not a joke. Serious, heartbreaking stories. And New Telegraph is where we'll start off from. New Telegraph newspaper is where we'll start off from. That is leading with in Borno, scores of terrorists killed as troops foil attacks on military formation. So a few brave, gallant soldiers paid the supreme price. Mom on brigade commander's fate. Don't be discouraged. Wary, Tinubu tells military. Again, court jails another Boko Haram victim 9 years after 10 years in detention. So you can see it's a mixed bag. On one hand, we have our people being killed. On the other hand, we have our soldiers paying the supreme price. We also have them killing terrorists. So what do you make of, I'm sure there's certain persons in our audience who are they're just desensitized on one hand. Some are just, they can't take it anymore. What do you make of all these stories?
Yeah, it's one step forward, two steps back. On the one hand, you hear the cheering news that some Boko Haram people were neutralized, and that's cause for happiness and joy. But on the other hand, you hear that some of our troops paid the supreme price. And I think the defense headquarters has actually confirmed that some of our troops were actually lost their lives and paid the supreme price in this latest attack in Borno. And the president has issued commiserations and is mourning the loss. And I asked myself, how long ago, how recently were we mourning another loss? And the president was also saying the same things, to where, like you said, it's starting to sound like a broken record, because we're, on the one hand, we're mourning one day, we're saying it won't happen again, we'll get justice for the victims. Well, to me, that notion of justice for the victims is dubious anyway, because it doesn't restore the life. It doesn't cure the harm, but to some extent, at least, maybe it mitigates the loss somewhat. But what we should do is prevent the loss from happening in the first place, instead of trying to get justice for it after the fact, which doesn't make anybody whole anyway. So it's quite worrisome. And when you look at things like America yesterday asking its non-emergency staff to leave Abuja because security is deteriorating in the country, even though I looked at that and took it with a bit of a grain of salt, because these are routine pronouncements by America. They do that from time to time. And when I look at the fact that it's particularly Abuja that they evacuated, and Abuja is not really under any imminent threat and has not particularly been a theater of terroristic activity, it lets me know that it's a precautionary move on the part of the United States, not because there's any particular imminent threat. Some people say, well, maybe they've got intelligence that suggests that something's about to happen in Abuja, but I understand that there's some reciprocity in the partnership between our country and theirs in terms of security, to where if they had intelligence of an impending attack anywhere, not just Abuja, they are obligated to share that information with our security forces. So I don't think that is any particular cause for alarm, but that's not to say that the insecurity is not spiraling out of control, and we're actually getting tired of mourning every other day and commiserating with families of lost ones. It's even all the more unconscionable and heartbreaking and tragic when it is our fighting forces that are involved. You know they put their lives on the line for our country. You know that when they took that oath to join the military, they knew that their lives were at risk. But when you see avoidable deaths, especially of those who are defending the rest of us, when you see situations that expose them to unnecessary danger. When I say unnecessary, what I mean is this has been going on for too long. We already know it's coming. We usually know where it's coming at, why it's coming, how it's coming. So we have enough knowledge to be able to defend against it. Besides, an entire country, the fighting force of an entire country, cannot be rendered prostrate by a ragtag a gathering of misfits. There is nowhere in the world, even where they have insurrections and where they have agitations and separatist movements, there is nowhere in the world where any non-state actor can stand up to a government. The coercive apparatus of the government, the military, the fighting capability of any government anywhere in the world can take down and subdue any non-state actor. I've never known a non-state actor that can hold a government to ransom. So there's got to be a political or other dimension to this engagement that we are not aware of. It's got to be more than simply just some people terrorizing the entire country and we don't have any answers to them.
Just before we leave the New Telegraph, there's another story I want you to speak to, just beside the pictures we're seeing, where TEC is raising alarm, saying fuel may hit 2,000 naira per litre. It was given, I was checking the numbers, it dropped to less than $100. It's getting back there. Now, the very biggest concern is to the effect that, the vessels have not been moving out of the Strait of Hormuz. So they are still caught up in the Persian Gulf area, and also all of that movement down to Asia and all. So what has arrived in many of these places are things that had left before the war. Now the war is there going on. So, and you know how slow ships move. So the question is, when those stock they'll be over, exhausted, depleted. Before this sets, if they finally resolve the ceasefire and the ships start moving, before it gets to destination, there's going to be a big hit that may take a surge, bring a surge in the price of PMS and every other petroleum product. So they are saying, government, you need to be proactive, but because the government is not saying anything yet. What do you make of it?
Well, ever since this war started, we've seen spikes and ebbs in the price of petrol at the pump. And that basically is because the government is not cushioning the effect of the global shocks of the war in terms of energy, in terms of oil, in terms of gas. Government is really not being proactive in terms of cushioning the shocks. So that's why Nigerians have been subjected to the vagaries of the market at the fuel pump. Just yesterday, because this issue of the ceasefire began to unravel a little bit, it affected immediately the global price of oil, and we saw the per barrel price swinging up immediately. Now, the way capitalism works in Nigeria, in spite of the fact that there's already oil in the pipeline at the old prices, because of what is happening on the international market, the price adjustment is immediate. It doesn't wait and say, oh, I have old stock, I'll sell it at old price. Because the marketers themselves are forecasting and saying, so if we sell it at the old price, what happens when that gap that Jeffrey's talking about between the stock that's in the pipeline and the gap that will occur between when the strait is reopened and things start moving as slow as ships are? They have to more or less make up for that vacuum in between the current stock running out and new stock coming in. So they will adjust themselves to make sure that they cushion whatever risks to their profit margin. They're capitalists. The people who are in the oil and gas business are not doing it for charity. That is the government's role, is to look at that supply discrepancy and try to mitigate it for the citizens. But I look at the government and I say, well, look, ever since 2023 that this new government came in, and the two major reforms were announced on the very day that the administration was inaugurated. Since that day, government revenues have increased. But we've not seen it translate into a meaningful change in the cost of living of Nigerians. So if after close to 3 years of having more money in government's coffers, poverty is increasing, money in our pocket is buying less, there's more of an economic squeeze on the ordinary Nigerian, I don't see how we can now have expectations of government that at a time when something unexpected has happened and it's a global crisis that we can use as a crutch, that, oh, well, this is not our fault, we didn't remove subsidy, we didn't eliminate a parallel market. This is not our doing. We have no control over this, so how can you be expecting that we can do anything to help you? So I look at it and I say, in a situation where it was self-inflicted, government didn't do anything for the people. So how do we now expect that at a time that something is happening that has nothing to do with that government, we can have expectations that they will make things easier for the Nigerian people? Look, every man for himself, God for us all. You better sort yourself out or else I feel sorry for you.
That's very clinical and sounds like, we're between the devil and the deep blue sea.
Absolutely.
Speaking of more money in government's coffers, The Guardian does an enumeration for us this morning, and it would interest you to note that you're paying more for a number of things, but the question is, are you getting the required benefit, for which you expect government to deliver on? How government squeezes masses to fund bureaucracy inefficiency. And under that, there's a quote that captures a sense of the reportage. Under the current administration, Nigeria has seen a strategic shift toward revenue harvesting, resulting in a sharp upward revision of fees for essential government services like passports, driver's licenses, and education, transforming basic entitlements into significant financial burden for citizens. Take a look at, the illustrations also under that quote. 185% cumulative increase in passport fees, 186% surge in cargo tariffs. That's why you're paying more for vehicles. And in fact, there's a decrease in importation of that particular product, according to reports. There's 74.87% hike for NIN data correction. Under that, you see this one, alarmingly high university tuition. Of course, the administration will present the excuse that there is the poster child, as Jeffrey would call it, of the administration, the students' loan scheme. But that has consequence, as we see here. And there's also driver's license cost revised, 15,000 to 21,000. Mr. Kitobi, what are your thoughts on all of this? Of course, there's apparently, as The Guardian puts it, a harvesting of revenue from these areas of services provided by government. But what are the outcomes?
Well, it's not a bad thing in and of itself that the fees have increased. But then we wouldn't complain if, as the fees increased, the quality of the services increased, which was government's excuse for increasing the fees to begin with. They said, well, look, of course, because cost of inputs have gone up, there's middlemen touts who extort individuals, and of course, there's the idea that, if we increase the fees, we can deliver better service quality. So the dichotomy now simply is that we're paying more for just about everything. Like you said, passport issuance, driver's license, number plates, changing the data on your NIN. I hear that even things like air freight coming in, the duty or whatever it is has been increased on all that. Problem is, service delivery has not improved. It still takes you ages, in spite of all that the Minister of Interior has said. You still go through a very cumbersome process to get your passport and to get it within a very short amount of time. If there's an error on your NIN, for example, your national identification number, to get it corrected, in spite of the humongous fees you have to pay, you still jump through hoops to get it corrected. To get a number plate to your vehicle, you're paying astronomical amount of money. But like I said, if you're getting the service and you're getting it efficiently, nobody would particularly, people would complain a bit, but we'd go about it grudgingly. You know how Nigerians are. We're resilient people. We'll moan and we'll groan, but we'll adjust. Just like we adjust to every fuel hike, we'll adjust to the fees we pay for government services. But the breakdown comes in the fact that the services are ridden with not just corruption, but inefficiency. And that is what is leading to the idea that the hike in prices are not commensurate with service delivery. So it makes it look like government is more interested in harvesting the revenue from these services, which government exists to provide. That's what a government exists to do. Part of securing lives and property and ensuring the welfare of its citizens is providing basic services. Look, for example, the passport thing is particularly unconscionable because every Nigerian youth is trying to get out today. So passport issuance is about the #1 government service that is in high demand. Total, completely high demand. First of all, the fact that Nigerians are even trying to leave the country is a failure of governance to begin with, as far as I'm concerned. It's based on the fact that government has not been able to improve the lot of the ordinary Nigerian. Is what makes the overseas more attractive, makes it look like a greener pasture to young people, because there's an absence of hope for them here. So if now there's that massive demand on things like passport issuance, you hike the fees and you say they should pay almost double or triple what we used to pay, but you're not delivering commensurate services. That to me is a failure of governance, and that's part of what some civil society organizations who said Nigeria is at the brink of collapse. That was one of the things they particularly harped on, was the fact that there's insecurity. Number 2, there's economic strangulation. And number 3, they said the inefficiencies of governance. Partly corruption, partly incompetence, partly nonchalance, actually. It's like, who could be bothered? It's business as usual. But at least don't squeeze Nigerians any tighter than what we're already going through. Already economically, it's harsh for everybody. Now imagine that basic government services, basic, you now have to pay so much more at a time when the money in your pocket is buying less. It's not a good situation all the way around.
There's a lot to chew on when it comes to the Nigerian state.
Yes.
Bukola, you have the next one.
Yes, and the next one, I hate to disappoint you, Mr. Kitobi, is in the same breath. Let's take a look at the Vanguard newspaper, and it leads with something rather concerning. And, you know, sometimes you'd say, okay, this concern is just in major cities of the country, but I doubt that that is the case if you went round to some cities that are not necessarily the major capitals. Take a look at the Vanguard newspaper. Special report, that's how it's titled at the top. And the headline says, cutthroat rent hikes worsening Nigeria's housing crisis. How landlords, estate agents exploit hapless tenants with arbitrary rent fees. Why rents are skyrocketing, what Nigeria must do, low incomes, high building costs, weak mortgage system. Others fingered 550,000 housing units needed yearly to overcome 15 million deficit in 10 years. Mr. Kitobi, I'd like you to speak to the experience of Nigerians here in this regard.
Yes, Lagos is particularly terrible, and I'm sure all around the country as well. Everybody's experiencing this, and you just have to put it in the sphere where, put the blame squarely where it belongs, and that is simply because of a shortage in low to medium cost housing, which is government's duty to provide. I mean, as a private landlord, you know what it costs you to put up your property. You know how much you're paying in land use tax. You know how much you're paying in waste management fees. You know how much. So it's almost very difficult to ask a private landlord to control the rent in terms of what he's willing to charge, because it costs him money to put up his property. But government has a role to play in what they call social housing. And I remember particularly in Lagos in the 70s when Lateef Jakonde was governor of Lagos State, and there's no way you go in Lagos today that there's no Jakonde Estate and Jakonde bus stop, because in the 4 years that he was governor, he made sure that he built low to medium income houses, and they weren't distributed just to political cronies and friends of the government in power. There was open balloting where ordinary Nigerians were able to procure 1, 2, 3 bedroom flats according to their ability. And they were given a scheme where they could pay for it little by little without necessarily a formal mortgage scheme per se, which the mortgage industry in Nigeria hasn't really been fleshed out to the point that ordinary Nigerians can walk into a bank, put a 5% down payment and get a 30-year mortgage on an existing property or one they want to build. It's not that straightforward or simple yet. So there's a deficit in housing. There's something to be said for rent control. I do believe that landlords shouldn't be able to double or triple rent overnight. I do think that there should be some measure of control. But at the same time, I don't think you can totally regulate private housing based on the fact that landlords or property owners invested their money and they know what rate of return that is adequate recompense for the risk that they have taken. So it all falls down in government again, falls on government, that social housing is a key component of the dividends of democracy that government is supposed to deliver. So I see some governments trying to provide housing, but the truth is ordinary Nigerians are priced out of the housing, out of the units that government is providing. Okay. Ordinary Nigerians are priced out of it.
Yeah, before I let you go, Mr. Akintobi, just if you can do this in 1.5 minutes.
Yes.
This Nigeria.
Yes.
Lassa fever fatalities rise in Nigeria according to the NCDC. 167 deaths recorded so far, another 663, that's 663 cases confirmed across 22 states.
We've been playing with this Lassa fever like it's something to toy with, and slowly it's been seeping into our consciousness that this has epidemic potential and we need to ramp up defenses against this thing because it is a scourge that can spread virally. It can multiply very quickly, and it's something along the order of toxicity of even COVID if it gets into the population. But we seem to not have taken it very serious. We've been hearing Lassa fever for the last year and more, and I haven't really seen any major health initiative to combat it. So perhaps media needs to play a bigger role in terms of making a lot more noise about the fact that this thing could be a big problem if it's not quickly addressed.
So Akintobi, as always, thank you so much for bringing your expertise and insight into these issues that bother all of us, whether it's health, whether it's national security or governance in general.
My pleasure always. Thank you for not bringing up ADC and scrambling my brain for the weekend.
Well,
because that issue is so complicated.
We'll
now.
Resume next week
okay.
With that matter.
Have a lovely weekend, Nigeria.
Because it looks like it's not leaving anytime soon.
Because the case is still in court.
Yes.
Certain things have not been. Well, for now, just one.
Okay.
And, okay, there's another one. I think they filed another mandatory injunction. So, so many injunctions that gentleman had filed interim and interlocutory. These ones are filing mandatory injunctions. So. The injunctions flying all over the place.
And how many factions do
we have not even gotten to the substantive issue because of argument about jurisdiction.
Not yet.
We'll continue that conversation next week, hopefully. But thank you so much. But I'm tired of talking about factions in 2026 April. I want the parties to be stable so that we can compare and contrast who has a better plan for Nigeria.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
My pleasure always.
Akintobi, as always, we'll take a break now. When we come back after this, we'll talk about the economy and some update. What is called the Nigerian a development update coming in from the World Bank, and we're going to segue from that into what is playing out in Iran, the oil and gas sector and the energy sector in general. Our guest is already seated, waiting. Stay with us.
Welcome back. It's still your perfect morning starter right here on Channels Television. And this, takes us straight into our discussion as we've looked at the implications of, government services on the economy. And we start with the World Bank's latest report, the Nigeria Development Update. And there's so many legs to this report. Of course, we've seen recommendations from that report of return to issuance of import licenses. And we've had quite a discussion on the implications of this one. Looking through the report as well, you would see that it acknowledges that the crisis in the Middle East is already putting pressure on the gains that have been recorded from the reduction on inflationary pressures back home. So let's try to understand this report a bit further and, of course, its implications for not just for the Nigerian economy, but for our relationship as well with the Bretton Woods institution. And joining us now on the program today is Mr. Kelvin Emmanuel, an economist, and of course is the managing partner of, let's get it correctly now, the Energy Consulting Practice. Yes, Mr. Kelvin Emmanuel is the managing partner, the Energy Consulting Practice. He joins us from our Abuja studio. Mr. Emmanuel, welcome to the program.
Bukola, thank you so much. Good morning, and good morning to Kayode and Geoff.
First of all, I'd like you to speak to what may be uppermost in the minds of Nigerians. As I said, the report acknowledges the happenings in the Middle East as it, impacts upon Nigerian economy, the inflationary trends. We've seen, following the ceasefire, a reduction in the price of crude in the international market, of course, which has also begun to gain again following reports that the ships are not necessarily getting easy passage from the Strait of Hormuz. But given that and, a check on the landing price of petrol from the international market to Nigeria is somewhere above 1,040 to 70 naira, and we're buying for 1,245 naira, depending on where you are in the country. But my concern is that the shipping component is not necessarily on that cost, yet we're buying for 1,245 naira per liter. And is it, credible that off-takers, or if you like, retailers, who are also buying from our own domestic refinery, are saying that what is added to it is not necessarily significant profits, between 50 and 70 naira for logistics? Can they honestly say that that's just a profit that they're making, or the marketers making a killing on Nigerians from this concern, this crisis in the Middle East?
Bukola, very good question you've asked, and it's important that there is always clarification on this issue. So if you look at the oil market, there is what is called dated Brent and ice Brent. Ice Brent means intercontinental exchange, and it's the most liquid futures market for trading crude oil around the world. Dated Brent is the cost of oil price for delivering physical cargoes now, which is the spot market. The spot market for deliveries within 2 weeks, 14 days. And what you had before the war started about 6 weeks ago is the difference in price, what is called the Brent spread, between dated Brent and ice Brent, was not more than $2 a barrel. When the war started, and you saw that most of the first fields that went offline in the Middle East was 3 major fields in Iraq that was producing about 2.8 million barrels a day. Rumaila, West Kano, and Manu. They went offline. Today, 13 million barrels of crude oil is offline in the Middle East. And the reason is from damage of those wells or desalination plants that are feeding water into the wells, to the fact that when ships are not taking crude oil out, the throughput of terminals meant to store crude oil brought to surface daily, it gets overrun. There are no more terminals to store crude oil. It means you have to shut down the wells. So that means 13 million barrels of crude oil has gone offline, because before the war started, about 1,230 ships were passing the Strait of Hormuz on a monthly basis. That has dropped to less than 100 ships per month. So what has happened is you've seen like a widening of that Brent spread between ice Brent, which is a futures market that has deliveries of between 2 and 3 months, right? And the spot price, which is the dated Brent for physical cargoes that are priced within a 14-day timeline. As of yesterday, the spread difference was $36 a barrel. So, for example, if you look at spot price, the futures market, which is the market that we always look at $96, $99 yesterday, dated Brent was trading at about around $132, $134 a barrel. That's the price. In fact, at the peak, it went up to about $145 a barrel. And then when you add the other, shipping costs, you know, you add insurance costs. Insurance cost has 3 layers. Insurance cost has the layer on insuring the cargo and the crew. It has a layer of insuring the vessel, hull insurance, and then it has a layer of insuring what they call war risk insurance, right? Those are the 3 layers, and the spread has quadrupled over the last 6 weeks. It went up to about $160 a barrel for delivering crude oil to refineries around the world. Okay?
Mr. Emmanuel,
if you
Mr. Emmanuel,
based on...
Mr. Emmanuel, pardon me. The shipping cost, the insurance cost should have been taken off because we are refining at home. So we have a domestic refinery. So the shipping cost from the international route back to Nigeria is not a factor in this case.
No, it is a factor because Dangote needs 19 cargoes to refine on a monthly basis. And today, as we speak, he's still importing 10 cargoes out of the 19 cargoes. And even for the cargoes that are allocated from Nigeria, Dangote is actually not buying directly from the operators upstream based on sections 109 of the PI on domestic crude supply obligations. Dangote is buying through third parties because these operators have signed lifting agreements that they say are stabilization clauses against the provisions of domestic crude supply obligations, which says that NMDPRA is supposed to take a measurement for the shortage of feedstock and send it to NUPRC to ensure that there is a percentage of their output daily that is allocated to the refinery, and that export permits are not granted by the Ministry of Petroleum and Ministry of Finance until the domestic refiner has full supply of its shortage, right? So Dangote is buying through third-party traders, and they are adding these spreads. They are not giving him crude oil at the ICE price of $99 or $96 a barrel. They are giving him at the dated Brent price of about $132, $134. So that's the price at which we're calculating. And the formula is very simple. If you take dated Brent price, $134 a barrel, multiply it by the exchange rate, let's take it at 1,410 naira per dollar, divide it by 159 liters, which is the number of liters you get when you process a barrel of crude oil. You get the true north of the actual price of crude, of petrol. And if you do that calculation today as we speak, that calculation is higher than the price at which Dangote is selling at gantry. That calculation will bring it to somewhere around 1,240, 1,275 naira a liter, which is higher than the price is offering for 1,200 naira per liter. So he's running at a loss. And the reason why he's able to still break even is because cumulatively, you know, when you have a difficult situation like this, you spread, you do your crack spread not based on PMS alone. You do your crack spread based on other products that you refine, like AGO, like jet fuel, like other non-transportation fuels, polypropylene crystals, and we're not going into details and the likes of them. So practically speaking, right, he's between a rock and a hard place and saying that, look, do we raise the price of petrol based on the current realities of the market and risk a backlash from Nigerians saying that Dangote is squeezing them because they don't understand the realities of how this market trades? Or do we keep it and run at a loss like it's currently running? If he were to wish, I don't think he would wish that this war in the Middle East started and he's in this position, because as we speak, if you do the actual numbers, Dangote is running at a loss for selling PMS in Nigerian markets.
All right, so there's a lot to unpack. We can talk about the middlemen, the traders in this sense, and whether it's possible to get them out given the PIA. You can speak to that. But the other part we want to speak to, which is one of the big highlights of the report, that is the NDU report, the Nigeria Development Update by the World Bank in Nigeria. And we're looking at some of the recommendations they made, because everything is tied together. The reason why we had to look at these numbers that you've professionally analyzed and how it came down to the PMS price at the pump, at the filling station, is because right now there's pressure in terms of supply. And we know that Dangote has maintained that over and over, that it doesn't get the number of cargoes it's supposed to get from the NMPCL. So, of course, the refinery is about 650,000 barrels per day. There's expansion plan. So that comes about between 17 to 19 cargoes. So if he gets less than that, he has to import. And the premium price being put on even local freighting of this petroleum product. But the World Bank is talking about some of the things that are happening as far as this war is concerned. And that has to do with the windfall. Windfall on one hand is bringing more money to the government. Whether it's over 100 or less than 100, we earmark $65, and they're talking about reducing inflationary pressure. The argument can also be when they recommended that they should restore PMS competition by reopening imports so that prices can reduce. The PIA is a deregulated sector. Everyone is allowed to go and bring in whatever they want to bring in terms of petroleum product as long as they have the license. So they're not running foul of the law in terms of that supply chain, if you will. But the question is, given what is playing out now, how can they bring in products that will significantly make prices lower than what Dangote is selling us? Is that a possibility?
Joe, very important question you asked, and I was a bit surprised when I saw in page 14 of Nigerian Development Updates that the World Bank, IBROD and IDA, released on Nigeria. I was a bit surprised because it's contrary to the PIA currently. Sections 317, 7 to 8 of the PIA says that when the domestic refiner has shown capacity to supply the local market with the daily feedstock, petrol feedstock that he needs, that NMDPRA is supposed to cease issuing import licenses. So really, the government will run foul of the law if it grants new import licenses to marketers to bring in products into Nigeria, considering that Dangote is able to solve 100% of Nigeria's daily petrol consumption. Okay? The recommendation of the World Bank, it's a bit counterproductive. And the reason I said it's counterproductive and it's not in the best interest of Nigeria is because you have a situation where Dangote has successfully, done full backward integration for petroleum and petrochemical refining. And he has been able to successfully, contribute to stabilizing the FX markets in Nigeria, ensure that there's net export proceeds that comes from exporting refined petroleum products. And he's been able to also reduce the demand for FX, for imports of petrol, AGO, Jet A1, and other non-transportation fuel derivatives. So I don't know, for example, why we're talking about industrialization and achieving a $1 trillion economy, and World Bank is coming to tell Nigeria that Nigeria should issue import licenses to allow marketers bring in all kinds of products that historically has not met up with ASTM testing standards for sulfur level, for octane rating, for flash points, or distillation level that are set in the PI. And the PI is very clear on the sulfur level accepted in Nigeria at 50 ppm parts per million in sections 317.11 of the PI. And moreover, I'll tell you, Geoff, I don't even think that the marketers today can land PMS in Nigeria at less than 2,000 naira per liter, because one of the major supply points for the Russian Urals that were used for blending in Lomé and Malta, historically, Ukrainian drones, UAVs, those kamikaze drones that are armed, have actually destroyed a lot of those facilities in Russia. So I don't know how, for the life of me, the World Bank will be saying that, the government should issue more import licenses and bring in products as a way to
let me understand. Let's marry the law with everything. Let's marry the law. So if the sector is deregulated, deregulation means multiple players. That's my understanding of deregulation. Yes. If the sector is deregulated and we can have multiple players both across the streams, let's talk about the supply element now, people that are bringing in products. So what does the law say if we are able, based on DCSO, domestic crude supply obligation is given to our local refiners, and they're able to supply the local market? Does that in any way stop any importer by law not to also do business in Nigeria, if you get my drift? So Dangote refinery, every other refinery has been able to serve within this shock. So now we're not dealing with the question of availability, we're dealing with the question of affordability. does that negate the fact that people can still, if they choose to say they want to be importers of the petroleum product, is that against the law?
Job, so very important question you asked. Now, what the law says is that if the domestic refiner, and it is very clear in 317.7-8, has met up with Nigeria's domestic demand on a daily basis, that the regulator, NMDPRA, should cease giving import licenses to bring in products into Nigeria. And WTO is also actually clear in its Article 6 on this competition law. And it says that if imports pose material damage to domestic production in key sectors, the government is supposed to apply a tariff to discourage imports. Right? So what you have historically, Geoff, is that you've had a situation where under the domestic crude intervention stock, where the government warehoused 445,000 barrels of crude and was using it as subsidy for crude oil swap. So they will take the crude, they will export the crude, give it to traders or give it to refineries abroad. Under Jonathan, they were giving to 13 refineries. When Mele came, they switched to direct sale, direct purchase. They were giving it to commodity traders. They will now calculate and bring in the equivalent of the refined petroleum products, but they were not bringing in the right volume of refined petroleum products in Nigeria because they were basically inflating the amount of daily consumption and diverting the products. It will land in the ports, documentation will be done, and then the products will be diverted to other ports within Africa. And so that was what was going on, right? So if you have a situation, for example, where DCSO says that you're supposed to provide crude oil feedstock to meet the feedstock limit of the domestic refiner to be able to refine and supply the Nigerian market, number one, they are not providing that feedstock today. Under the domestic crude intervention stock, right? The 300,000 barrels of crude oil that was used as crude oil swap to provide or apply under recovery or subsidy on petrol and freeze the price, the government is not even reporting it to the federal government of Nigeria Consolidated Revenue Fund. If the government says they are reporting it, let them come and show Nigerians and let them explain to Nigerians why Nigeria is operating 3 budget cycles and operating 2024 capex budget and is not able to finance the capital component of the budget. Let them come and explain to Nigerians why is there chronic budget deficit and why is the president going to National Assembly and telling them that he's going to extend the operationalization of 2025 budget into 2026 and there's no appropriation act for 2026, right? So if you have a situation, for example, where marketers, some of them have crude oil refining license, right? License to establish LTE. The regulator has refused to review that license because it's been there for the longest time, and they're not asking them why you're not moving from LTE to ATC and then LTO, right? And they are using that crude oil refining license that is at LTE level as a justification for, importing products into Nigeria, considering that Dangote is able to supply 100% of what Nigeria needs, then there's a disconnect in the operationalization and compliance with what the PIA says.
So, Mr. Emmanuel, I'm reading through the PIA, Section 317, which has been a major point of dispute. And I should say that this matter goes all the way back. Dangote had taken the NMPC to court, importers as well. Over this particular matter, the NMDPRA had to speak on this. But the section which you referred to, this is Section 9. It's a build-up from 1 all the way to 9. It says, pursuant to Section 8, license to import any product shortfalls may be assigned to companies with active local refining licenses or proven track records of international crude oil and petroleum products. It also speaks to, in Section 7, Sub 7, says the minister shall set forward a clear transition plan within 60 days. And he had earlier talked about from the government on behalf of the Federation may request the services of NMPC Limited as supplier of last resort to ensure adequate supply and distribution of PMS for a period of not exceeding 6 months. Just to read that word for word from the PIA. But here's a challenge. This matter had gone to court. I understand that Dangote stopped the court processes last year. And there was a lot of back and forth. And at some point, the NMPC was saying, well, we have to do this. We had looked through and we think that this is the right time for us to do this. So here's the bone of contention. If you indeed say that importing will be more expensive, so why don't you leave those people who would buy it, and I'm talking about the consumers, to make their choice. Leave the market open. If people want to import, let them import. Naturally, Nigerians will pay where they see that the price is lower and it's more affordable. So why not allow the market do its thing in that sense, if you catch my drift, Mr. Manuel?
Kayode, I'll tell you, very excellent question you've asked. So historically, right, the issue has not been with importation, the issue has been with quality. Now, in the oil and gas sector, especially in downstream, your certificate of quality on your sulfur and your octane rating determines price. A 50 ppm petrol, which is what PIA specifies, and if you read through that 317 that you're currently reading and you go down to 11, you'll see that the ECOWAS had a meeting in 2020, and at that meeting they agreed and issued a communique that the PMS sulfur limit will be 50 ppm, and that the regulators are allowed for a period of 4 years to apply their own discretion and determine what the PMS sulfur level will be. And several regulators, applied that discretion. Nigeria applied it and increased from 50 to 200. And that 11 says that if by 2024, when that time limit expires, the regulator does not come to renew that discretion, that it will revert to what they reviewed it initially from, back to the 50 ppm that was specified at their meeting in 2020 of February 2020. That's what that section 317.11 says. So the kicker is, will they comply with the sulfur limit that is agreed in sections 317.11? Because the quality of the product determines the price. A 50 ppm petrol, the price of it is not the same with a 200 ppm petrol or a 500 ppm petrol. Historically, what they've done is that they've imported petrol that has sulfur level of more than 500 ppm, 1000 ppm, and tests were conducted to show that some of the products that were sold, that were imported into Nigeria, actually didn't comply with the PI. So if you allow them to import, they will import lower quality petrol that is in violation of the PI.
Mr. Manuel,
right?
that is where regulation.
Where you're competing with a refiner that is complying with the PI.
So that is where regulation comes
in. How is that fair competition?
Are you saying that the regulator turns a blind eye, or is incapable, incompetent, such that you're not able to say, well, this is a sulfur content in this product, and we're not going to allow it come into the country? Is that what you're saying, that the regulator is incompetent?
Kayode, I am saying it and I'm not missing words. NMDPRA has overlooked historically the quality of the sulfur level that were imported by marketers into Nigeria in violation of sections 317.11 of the PI. I'm saying it to them categorically. And if they deny it, let them come and show Nigerians if they have a lab in Nigeria that complies with ASTM standards to test for sulfur level for petrol products that are imported into Nigeria. Historically, they've ignored it. I'm saying it categorically.
Mr. Emmanuel, how much does Dangote Refinery sell petrol to other marketers in the country?
So at Gantry, petrol is sold for 1,200 naira per litre today.
1,200 naira?
At Gantry. And you know when I did the 1,200 naira per litre at Gantry, which means if you go with a truck, if you pass KYC and you go with a truck, you buy it at 1,200 naira per litre at the Gantry.
Okay.
And for coastal loading, I think coastal loading has a difference from Gantry price. Okay,
so for other marketers who buy from Dangote, who sell to us, the consumers, they're selling at 1,245, 1,255 naira per litre. Are you saying, or are the marketers saying that all the profit they make from buying from the major marketer, from the refiner, is 45 naira?
Bukola, the petrol market is a tight margin business. It's high volume, tight margin business. It's not low volume, high margin business anywhere in the world. The margin, even for the refiner, is very tight. And I did the calculation for you. I said that if we do the calculation based on the price of dated Brent is trading at around $135 a barrel today. If you look at the ICE Brent is trading at about between $99 and $102, $103 a barrel. that difference is anywhere around $32, $33. If you multiply dated Brent price by the exchange rate and divide it by the number of liters you get when you refine 1 barrel of crude oil, it comes to anywhere between 1,240 and 1,270.
Mr. Emmanuel, that's rather hard to believe.
So
Pardon me. These marketers have to get the petrol from the manufacturer with their trucks. They have to either power that truck with diesel or petrol. So are you saying that 45 naira is the entire profit that they make, even if that's a tight margin price? If you're in that business, is that all the profit you'll be willing to make?
Bukola, I said that petrol business is a tight margin, high volume business.
No,
So
Mr. Emmanuel, if you're a marketer in that field, is that all the profit you would be willing to make? 45 naira, 55 naira.
Of course.
That's all the profit you'd be willing, despite the risks involved. There are marketers who are bringing in their trucks to get petrol from the manufacturer from other parts of the country, and that has implications on transportation. Is that all the profit you think that they will be willing to make? Or there is more to the petrol price? Hold on, Mr. Emmanuel. Or there's more to the petrol price that they're actually getting from Dangote than is made public to the consumers, Nigerians?
Bukola, I don't know how you're doing the math, but 55 naira.
Because I don't know how you're doing the math
50,000
either. I don't understand your own mathematics either.
No, you're asking me if 55 naira per liter is sufficient margin to be in the business of retailing petrol products around Nigeria, and I'm saying it is a fantastic margin to have.
Just 55
because if
naira.
you multiply 55 naira. Yeah,
hold on.
Naira per liter, for example, times 50,000.
Just before we exit that conversation.
It's a fantastic margin to have.
Hold on. Just before we exit that conversation, you said earlier that Dangote is actually running at a loss. But Dangote, amid this, is actually now exporting more petroleum to other African countries. By the way, are you open to the book? So how would you know that the domestic refiner is running at a loss?
Because I'm not the staff of Dangote. I'm not open to the books. I'm simply applying like standard calculations that works for every refiner around the world. The oil and gas sector is a very transparent sector, but it's a very complex sector. And I'm saying that this is how refiners all over the world calculate the price per liter and calculate their margins. And based on the calculation I've given you and the variables I've put on the table today, I can confidently tell you that if you multiply dated Brent price, which is the price of physical cargoes delivered to the refiner, by the exchange rate divided by the number of liters in the barrel of crude oil, today is running at a loss. And the dilemma is in is that if he decides and says he's going to increase the price of petrol at gantry or for coastal loading above his cost price, he will run the risk of Nigeria saying that he's running a monopoly and he's trying to punish them. But he's a businessman, and it's a very difficult situation to be in, unfortunately.
All right, Mr. Manuel.
He didn't call for the Middle East war.
Yes. Yes, at the end of the day, what Nigerians want is to be able to afford PMS price. That's what Nigerians want. So in your view, if you can do it in 1 minute, how can we get these products a bit more affordable? I don't want to use the word cheap now. With the present situation we find ourselves, who has to play a role here?
Job, unfortunately, the government did not plan. But even at that, the crude oil that the government was using to apply under recovery, 300,000 barrels per day. Can the government apply that feedstock as like, because Nigeria needs about 300,000 barrels equivalent of crude oil to satisfy domestic consumption on a daily basis. Can the government use that feedstock, to apply a discount on the sale of crude to the refiner so that he can lower and freeze the price of petrol to the Nigerian market and is not subject to all the issues around dated Brent versus ice Brent, shipping costs, interest rates, and all the external factors that are causing shock to the price of crude oil as he gets it, and that is going into pricing petrol in the Nigerian market. The government cannot account today, and I'm saying it categorically, Geoff, the government cannot account for the 300,000 barrels of crude oil it was using to apply for under recovery to subsidize petrol in Nigeria before the president announced in 2023 that he was going to remove under recovery for petrol subsidy in Nigeria. The government cannot account for it. Yeah, there's nowhere in the revenue line of the federal government of Nigeria where you can see the revenue accretion from removing petrol subsidy. in 2023? Where is the crude oil?
Okay.
Where is the crude oil?
Because the
That's the question we
argument,
need to ask.
Because the argument is always the fact that removing subsidy has increased FAC. So where is the increase in FAC coming from if it's not from the subsidy?
Exactly. Where is the increase in FAC? And George, today we're debating pipeline security. NMPCMD is saying that it has led to increase in daily output for crude.
No, what I'm saying,
before I
let you go, what I'm saying, Mr. Manuel, is that they are saying that for removing subsidy from, let's say, PMS, that's why we're seeing an increase in FAC. Is that a tenable argument?
That is not a tenable argument because the government cannot show you anywhere in the revenue line where you can see accretion from the 300,000 barrels of crude oil that under domestic crude intervention stock that was applied for under recovery or crude oil swap to freeze price of petrol in Nigeria.
Maybe when we get the minister.
And why is the government giving 110,000 barrels of crude to militants to do pipeline security in Nigeria? When you have the Navy and you have the Nigerian Army. And they are underfunded.
That's a heavy allegation.
Why are they giving
sure the
110,000 barrels for petrol pipeline security?
Yeah, Mr. Emmanuel, that's a heavy allegation.
And it's off the balance sheet of the federal government.
That I'm sure the government, I'm sure they are listening to this allegation that you've leveled against them. Maybe Minister of Finance or whatever is the proxy will come and respond to that, as well as the NNPCL as well, because this under-recovery matter has been a big a big issue, if you want. But I must thank you. That's how much we can take. Always an exciting conversation with you when it comes to this sector. Kelvin Emmanuel, thank you so much.
Welcome back. We turn our attention now to the aviation sector. There's a lot going on there. We talk about the renovation of the airport, talk about the prices, of course, the usual disappointments. It wasn't exactly interesting times last week, particularly with the delays and what a lot of people experienced trying to fly across the country. But there's a matter that has been brewing since 2004, and till today, at least till the last time we checked, the matter has not been resolved. And it's about the state of workers in the defunct Nigeria Airways. We're joined on the program by aviation expert, Mr. Chris Aligbe. Sorry, they're with us in our Lagos studio. Good morning, Mr. Aligbe. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Yes, it's a good morning.
Good morning, sir. Welcome.
Right. Wherever you turn, there's enough issues to go around. Before we get into the issues in the aviation sector itself, because I think this is one conversation Nigerians have a lot to say about. I want us to talk about the state of the pensioners of Nigerian Airways. Since 2004, there's been that clamor. The Buhari government came, did some work, paid some money, approved some monies, but it was less than half of what was being demanded, or at least what was meant to be paid. And after a lot of back and forth, the Tinubu government gave approval, right, for another 20+ billion, I believe. 30+ billion to be paid. But since 2025, it looks like nothing has been done. So give us an update where we're at right now, or with this fate of the pensioners, a lot of them bedridden, old, helpless.
Thank you very much. Yes, in actual sense, the issue of pensioners and for whatever Nigeria was started, people say 2004 because that's when the records about liquidation. The liquidation was approved 2003 during the valedictory fake meeting of 2003 when a memo was presented by the then Minister of Aviation for the liquidation of the airline. Okay, but the actual liquidation, it was approved 2003, but then all activities started. So but what happens is that by going through the activities, well, before then, even in 2001, about 1,000 staff, including top-rated pilots and whatever, were taken out in what they call restructuring. A committee that was said, the Minister said, a Bokizawa committee, took out these excellent pilots. Then the tsunami came with the liquidation. When the liquidation came, all the staff, remaining 4,000+ staff, were taken out. But unfortunately for us, sadly, the then government, the president was under President Obasanjo,
also didn't approve any payment, not even terminal benefits. We had a protest, we had letters, we had everything. He didn't budge. He didn't approve any payment. Luckily, when President Yaradua of blessed memory came, he approved payment of 5%. That's the terminal benefit, not pension. The pension still stayed there. She didn't, you know, he didn't last long. But he was quite human and humane on this issue.
All right.
When Jonathan came, President Jonathan didn't care a hoot about it either. He did absolutely nothing.
Until President Buhari?
Yes, he did nothing.
No, I'm saying until the late President Buhari came.
Yes, until Buhari came. When Buhari came, Buhari was passionate about Nigeria Airways, what happened to staff, what happened to the airline. He approved payment. When he approved payment, the minister then, Hadi Sirika, put every effort, pushed it to the point where in finance is really where the incubus is always coming. At that time this happened, Kemi Adeosu was the finance minister. He didn't care one bit. In fact, there was so much humiliation and ignominy that the staff suffered because they were going to her office trying to, luckily, I don't know, God took her out. When God took her out, then came Zainab Ahmed in finance ministry. Zainab Ahmed ensured that payment was made, but it was the civil servants, whatever there was, and as they call PICA, presidential whatever, they halved the money that we're going to pay.
How much did they pay eventually? What was agreed?
About 50. what was agreed was 75, 70 billion plus. Right. Okay, they paid about half of it, and the other half remained. It wasn't paid. When this, you see, when Buhari came, we didn't have any big problem trying to protest because he was passionate about it. When President Tinubu came, again, President Tinubu didn't waste time, okay? He approved as the paper, he approved it, and when he approved it, you know, when he approves, he passes to finance. Finance will pass to aviation ministry. The Minister of Aviation and Aerospace, Barrister Kayamo, has done everything humanly possible, ministerially possible, to make sure that this payment is made. And they passed the documentation. By August last year, he sent all the needed documentation to Ministry of Finance.
So you're saying it's still stuck at the Ministry of Finance?
Yeah, that's where the incubus is always there.
What have you heard from Minister Wale Edun?
Minister of Finance?
Yeah. Yes.
We've gone there. Many even union members who are pursuing it, ALGA, they have all gone there. There have been meetings, even some legislators. They've gone to the mayor. All that you say is been passed to, oh, it is not in the purview of Minister of Finance, it's the Minister of State for Finance. You get to that, they say, oh, it's with the Accountant General, he has gone to Accountant General. All stories that we are hearing, but nothing has happened. It's over. It's getting 8 months since these papers were passed. And I know that even the Minister of Aviation has met a series of time with the officials and even some legislators have met to try to push this. But the paper is stuck there. And the last thing we are hearing, okay, they are thinking they will pay, but they will pay in groups. They will have 3 groups. With intervals of 2 months. I say, who is going to do that? Who is going to pay people in groups? This thing has been approved by the president. Why are you going to decide to pay? And this is earned income. And every day our people are dying. The age bracket now for retirees is between 60, the oldest is 101. Mr. Konu. We have pilots, we have Captain Hayes. Is about 91 years old. That's the first African pilot that landed aircraft in US. These are people to be celebrated. But instead of celebrating them, you have kept back their dues because they earned it. It's not that we are asking for palliative or for anything. These are not that end. So I don't know why the political actors have done their best. The president approved it. the minister has done everything, is now stuck in the Ministry of Finance. And every day, you go there, you ask them, well, and people are too weak now to go for protest. You can't find 90 years old people or 80 something. Most of them are in their 80s. Most of us are, the bracket is 60, 60 some years to 101. That's
so let's walk back. We're talking severance package here?
Yes.
What else are we talking about?
No, it's pension. There's severance package, you know, severance package when you are severance.
So I want to
paid.
So first, let's take it one by one. There's severance package.
Yes.
There's pension.
Yes.
Okay, what else? Those are the two major.
No, that is the two major things, yes. Severance package was paid by President Yaradua, blessed memory. Like I say, he didn't stay long, last long. He may have done that, but like I say, after him, President Goodluck Jonathan did absolutely nothing with all his finance minister. He didn't approve anything. So the finance minister, three of them, didn't have anything to do. But President Buhari, blessed memory again, approved. And then the aviation minister pushed it to finance. At finance, it got stuck.
Okay, so then you've taken us through that.
Yeah.
Help us understand the numbers of the entire aviation workers, and for the sums that have been paid. Is it that they're paid in batches, or the entire numbers access a certain percentage of the pension and they are waiting the remaining percentage? So help us understand how those who have benefited have benefited. Is it that some have received and then they have been settled, but there are still some outstanding numbers of ex-workers that are still waiting for a certain percentage?
No, nobody has been fully paid. Nobody. What was paid was 50%. Okay, even that 50%, there were some people say, oh, who waited for almost 1 year before they were open, but it's only 50% that was paid. What is still outstanding is for everybody. And like I say, at the time of liquidation, the number had come down by almost close to 5,000, 4,000 some. But before
5,000 ex-Nigeria Airways workers.
Yes, at the time of liquidation. But before the liquidation, prelude to it, 1,000 was taken out. In their usual, when they say restructuring, when you hear restructuring, it's a euphemism for cutting down staff. 1,000 plus staff, they were cut. We were taken out. So all those people joined. Together now we're talking about 6,000 staff that are still outstanding. About 600 of us, 600 of them have died.
Out of the 6,000?
Out of about 600 of them have died. And some of them are on wheelchairs, some of them in the hospital.
So in case I missed a bit of what you were saying, these monies, so pension, as we understand, is supposed to be monthly payment, right?
Pension is supposed to be monthly payment, but the government now, they came to those at the ministry, they want to pay it en bloc once for us, so there won't be yes. Some people still argued. There are some people who say, look, we're civil servants. We started as civil servants before ever.
And you were not absorbed into any other ministry?
No.
Did some go on to get engagements with other airlines? Between 2004 and now?
After they have, only a few, because many of the pilots, when they are pilots, they flew airplanes of bigger status, like DC-10, whatever. There are those who flew 747. But when you come down, you find that all the planes you're having, that 737, whatever, how many can they absorb? We had 737 pilots. Some of them got jobs somewhere, but at that time, they were already aging. So as of today, none of them is flying. And that's the certain about it, because at some certain age, you can no longer fly.
So let's assume that we have slightly over 5,000 people who are still alive, who are supposed to benefit from this and bulk pension, which looks like it's no longer pension if it's no longer being paid monthly. So maybe there's another name we can call it. How much are we talking about here? Do you have an amount?
I think it's about 35 billion.
35 billion?
Billion, yes.
So what's your experience with the current leadership at the Ministry of Finance?
is a, whatever I say, I think is a sad, it will be a sad commentary. Because I do not see why, after President has approved this, stay with them for about 8 months, has approved this, and then the paper is rigmaroling in the ministry. You go, you ask, they say it's here. You ask, sometimes they say they've not seen the paper, they've not seen the file. You let them know the file is this is when he came. The okay is with is not in the purview of the Minister of Finance per se. Right. It is the Minister of State, and you go to the Minister of it is the Accountant General. Oh, so this is what has been associated. Like I say, Ministry of Finance has become an incubus. It happens every day. It happened under Kemi Adoshu. It's happening now. Well, and people are dying.
And that's why we had to spotlight this matter. They say that you can tell a lot about a nation or a people from the way they treat children, women, and the elderly. So it's important that these issues are spotlighted and we put it out there. It's quite ironic, right? Because it looks like airports are now the most lucrative things because every other state is trying to have their own airports and their own carrier. So if it's really lucrative, then let's ensure that the right things are done by those who have worked. But Mr. Chris Aligbe, we have to thank you so much. We really hope that this is resolved as soon as possible, wherever it is, whether it's the Ministry of Finance, the Accountant General, or wherever it is.
They are all in finance.
Exactly.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your time, sir.
Thank you very much. I appreciate this opportunity to at least for us to see about this because we are now almost dumb and silent.
But you're not. Definitely not. So this is putting out a message to the ministry. You must speak to this, or more importantly, ensure that the right things are done. We'll take a moment now, and when we return, security takes center stage. Stay with us.
Welcome back, and so let's segue into something just as important, and it was our takeoff point at the start of the program: national security, the pressure that our soldiers on the front line are experiencing, with some having to pay the ultimate price as they battle against banditry, insurgency, kidnapping, and all forms of crime. Let's talk to someone who has experience from the front lines, although retired now. General Henry Ayola joins us virtually this morning on the program. General Ayola, good morning, sir, and welcome to the Morning Brief.
Good morning, Bukola, and good morning, Jeffrey. Thank you all for the stellar job you guys are doing.
Thank you, sir. Let's start with your own experience as a retired soldier. What is it like at the front lines, and as against what it should be in terms of protection for our soldiers? Are there bulletproof vests? Are there backup, artillery? Are they supposed to also be, what's the communication like in terms of situations where, there is an ambush and, a soldier is in dire need of protection, of backup to ensure safety?
It's a good place to start the discussion. The question you have asked actually borders on two very key concepts in military operations. You are talking of force protection and operation security. These are two concepts that are taken very seriously by any armed forces anywhere, and by, of course, commanders in the field who are concerned, directly responsible for the care and the welfare and administration and, of course, success of operation. So these two key concepts are always important, all the time. There is no time, not even withstanding the nature of operation or the kind of operation it is, these two will always be required. So at any time, even though I'm not there with them now, I know that even now, in fact, they will require them more because of the peculiar nature of the operation we've been dealing with. I have always called it a hybrid warfare because it has a little of all of the different types. It has asymmetric, it has guerrilla warfare, has operation other than war. It has a combination of several kinds of operation. Of course, the conventional warfare is also there. That's why I call it hybrid operation. And that also means that it is going to task us more in the area of force protection and operation security. Force protection, by the way, it talks about, just as you have defined it, the need to ensure that the soldiers and the officers in the field are protected, they're adequately kitted, they are protected both from battle space awareness and, of course, the environment and the theater in which they have to fight. And, of course, security, operation security is also got to do with ensuring that the element of secrecy and surprise are not lost at any time. And these are things that are played out. So often we hear of troops being ambushed. That means something happened. Either there was a leakage, how did the enemy know that they were going to walk, pass on that route and all of that. So these are critical issues any day.
So what was it like during your time?
Very good question. The nature of the operation on the plateau where I served, and plateau parts of Kaduna State and part of Bauchi State. Of course, it has elements of all of the ones that too we have in the Northeast, but at that time, yes, I mean, challenges were there in these areas that I've mentioned, no doubt, at all times. The truth is that anywhere in the world, except maybe nations like America, even them, it's not to say that your troops in the field will have everything that they can have. Of course, there's what we can call the minimum requirements that must be there to ensure that the troops' morale is high and that they have what it takes to get the job done. When a mission is given to any commander, you do your mission analysis, and then you look at what you have. Can it deliver, the mission you've been given? And of course, there's always the opportunity to interact with your higher commander to know, if you have other requests beyond what you have at the time. And of course, any higher commander who is giving you an assignment, because he's passed through that stage of yours as a junior commander, he knows exactly what it takes to get the work done. So if he gives you an assignment and you come back and you ask for certain additional resources, it's not going to take it. There is no offense about that. It's going to, of course, do its best to give you all you need to deliver. So yeah, that's always been there. And what it takes is for a government of any nation to make sure that you give the best within your limited resources. Of course, there are competing resources. Just as the security sector is asking for so much, I mean, the health sector, the education sector, all other sectors are also asking. So usually, a delicate balance for any government to know where to, put your balance at any time and, of course, give more attention at a given time. But again, we know the importance of security. Security is the precursor to every other development. If you don't have security, you cannot develop in any area at all. So usually security is given first, priority kind of concern. Yeah.
Well, General, let me come in here, General. Let's talk about what should be our priority, because whatever we think we're doing or whatever anyone does, results is the best answer to everything. Result is the finality. You may have all these complicated elements and complex elements that come together to make up whatever it is. I'm just talking about generally. What people will judge is result. So the results have shown that our soldiers are overstretched. The results have shown that we're losing soldiers. The results have shown that there's success in the missions of these terrorists due to the ease of what I call mass abductions, kidnappings. We have the wartime death toll in our country, even though we have not declared, an outright conventional war, it's an asymmetric warfare. So I'm putting all of these entities together so that it can help us make sense of where exactly should we start from to begin to, change the scale in terms of the results we are getting, so that we have less mass abductions or no mass abductions, less fatalities, because when you talk about security, you're talking about fatalities, incidents, and attacks. Where do we start from? Should we start from remuneration, more equipment, boots on the ground? Where exactly do we start from? You have been there, done that. You're now retired, but you have all the experience as much as possible.
Yes, thank you very much. Let's look at it from the from top down, the bigger dimension. I've always taken the position that what we are dealing with in Nigeria is not a security challenge. And I'd like to say it again, perhaps for the upteenth time. What we are dealing with is not a security challenge. You see, the adversary had cornered us to a position where we are simply chorusing the narratives that they have mainstreamed over time, skewed to favor, what is going on. And so when we call it security challenge, it even gets worse. When we move from say security challenge, we say it's a criminality, and all of those are deliberate to minimize the real issue. The real issue we are dealing with in Nigeria is a power problem. It's a political power problem. It derives, and I've said it again and again, that the Nigerian situation is a local manifestation of a global trend of clash of civilizations. That's what we're dealing with. And until we come to that understanding, it's like trying to fell a tree or trying to get rid of a tree. Instead of uprooting it, you are cutting branches, you are plucking leaves. That's what we've been doing so far. It has to start from the strategic level, where if this challenge is understood, you cannot solve a problem that you have not been able to define. The first step to solving a problem, and I don't know of any problem-solving technique or even a research methodology that does not require the statement of the problem. You must be able to diagnose and discern appropriately, collect all the available information, and then define and dimension the problem you want to solve. If you have not done that, then you may be solving a different problem, or you may not even be solving any problem at all. And I think that's where we've been, and that's why we've not seen much progress. Because it's either that we are deliberately dodging the issues, or we don't know what the issues are. But like I said, the clash of civilization is a global trend. And what we see in Nigeria is a local manifestation of that. And we see it manifesting as clash of identity, clash of interest, clash of ideology, clash of cultures, clash of principles, clash of values, clash of ethics, clash of agenda, clash of, you can't even talk of a single national interest if there are already clash of ideology, interest, and all of that. Now, that's where to start from that strategic point of view. Look at it, the question we've been dodging, for example, is who is the adversary? Who is the enemy we are dealing with? I mean, as a soldier, you are trained to keep your eyes on the enemy. You are trained to see nothing but the enemy until you get rid of him. Now, so if you cannot answer the question, who is the enemy we are fighting all of this while? As a nation, if we cannot have a singular definition of who the enemy is and what do they want, what is the intention of the enemy, who are they, where have they come from, what's their true identity, that is where to start. If we don't do that, then we will continue in this chasing shadows here and there without actually hitting the bull. That's what we've been doing. So for me, that's the start point. And that reduces everything to going back to fundamentals. Yes.
So we've seen of late either serving soldiers or the ones who have left coming out to speak about their experience. And it's not surprising to a lot of people, but to more Nigerians, they're shocked about those revelations, having to buy your own gear. And of late, particularly with the recent attack in Benishek, which the president has spoken to, you had some users online, appear to be soldiers, responding to the DHQ statement saying, well, this is not true, this is not what happened. Yes, we understand that our soldiers are gallant, they try to repel it, but this doesn't even paint the full picture, especially with the concerns around the brigade commander. So gradually we're seeing a very worrying situation. And I wonder if for you this has been a long time coming, and is this what is needed to really have that change that we desire within the security forces?
Thank you. I get that point. I think I saw the interview of, was it an interview? I think it was a clip of that soldier who talked about the year salary and all of that, or buying some kits. Let me put this straight. I mean, coming from the background, I started my military career from the military school in Zaria. So I've seen this for over 52 years now. The idea of a soldier or an officer, out of his own volition, spending some part of his own money to kit himself better than the standard kit. Of course, there's a standard kitting that the armed forces will give is either is Army, Navy, Air Force. That is still there. But it's not supposed to be a big deal that I remember even as a boy soldier, we were perhaps given 3 pairs of uniform. But I remember that I had extra pairs of mine that I bought by myself and sold by myself. So that does not paint the system any negatively. No, not at all. You are free. I mean, if you want to look good, if you want to have more uniform than the standard that you are given, it's okay. I mean, there's no law against it, but it's not an indication that the authorities are not kitting the soldiers well. No, I don't agree with that. I don't think it's that bad. I mean, I can speak for the system for that, and I know that has not changed. I mean, the idea of kitting soldiers appropriately, the minimum, or there's what we call the full service battle order, or full service marching order, or at least the lowest standard of kits that a soldier must be given. Those are usually there. Okay, so I think there's a need to disabuse the minds of the populace that no, it's not like to say that the authorities are not kitting the soldiers. No, that's not true.
So,
but again,
pardon me, are you saying, General, that every soldier gets a bulletproof vest? Every soldier is kitted appropriately? Is that what you're saying? From the authorities now, not from their own pockets?
I'm not in service right now. So if you talk about exactly what they get, that would be a function. But I'm telling you of what is standard. There usually is standard kitting, okay, of what every soldier gets. And that will include all of those that you have mentioned, depending on the availability of those things, of course. And depending, of course, on which theater a soldier is. Because again, where you don't have enough, you kind of rationalize what you have. Sometimes you innovate. Sometimes you make do with what you have. Of course, it's desirable that every soldier in a theater where such a need is should have those things, and every commander will do all that is within his power to get that across to the troops. Okay, that's the point I'm making. So it's not a kind of failure of the system to say, oh, soldiers are now the one paying for their uniform. No, that can't be the situation. But that's on one side. You talked about the Brigadier General, the issue of people falling, where I talked earlier about people falling into ambushes and all of that. Yes, I know some of those can be helped, and I think in recent time there has been an increased use of drones. We could have what we call ISR, that intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance drones that can cover flanks, be part of the vanguard, go ahead of the troops, so that the idea of falling into ambushes and all of that will be minimized. I mean, it will virtually be zero, if we have enough of that to go around. So that even if you have the minimum of a section moving, they should be covered appropriately with surveillance, both ahead, flanks, and rear, so that such things will be reduced. That's the point.
So, General, you have tagged this earlier on, a clash of civilizations. So whether it's a clash of civilizations or not, from where you stand, do you acknowledge that there is a gap at the front lines? And what is responsible for this gap in terms of technology, backup? What are frontline soldiers require to battle the enemy? Why is this gap there? And of course, talk to us also about who it is exactly we're up against.
Thank you very much. I think that's the critical question, or two critical questions you have packaged in one. Number one, who is the adversary? Who is the adversary? Okay, I mean, so far we have seen, if we go as back as 2009, We started with Boko Haram that started in the northeast. We know the background, the origin of Boko Haram. Originally started about 2002, okay, somewhere, in Jakusko in Yobe State, and then moved to Maiduguri, and then became, embedded in the system. They were just like a sect, preaching some different kind of, doctrines and all of that. And they were tolerated, in the nation where there's freedom of religion and all of that. But of course, if intelligence were, if you go back in intelligence, I'm sure the intelligence agencies will have written several papers as to the danger of that group until 2009, when their leader Mohammed Yusuf was extrajudicially killed, and then they became. They went all out attacking government agencies and installations and all of that. That has been in our hands. So you have Boko Haram. Now, let me, and this is where I come. Now, let me explain this, because this needs to come to light. When you hear Boko Haram, what comes to your mind is, some people have interpreted it to mean Western education is forbidden, but it's actually Western civilization. A more appropriate interpretation of that is Western civilization is forbidden. Now, but that's not even their real name. All of that is part of the deception, to keep the real thing from us. And that's already 2 layers of deception, even in that wrong name. Their true name, which is Jamatu al-His Sunnah Lidawati Wa Jihad, that's the real name, which says the people of the Prophet, the book, and jihad. So this is a jihadist organization. And that is deliberately hidden all along, so that we think we are fighting something that has got nothing to do with jihad. But that is, you cannot know somebody more than the person. Usually there are 3 ways of knowing a person: what the person says about himself, what others say about him, and what God says about the person. Now, if the person is saying, this is who I am, I can't see you redefining the person better than the person you are who are defined themselves. So that's number one. Now, from that, we remember how we then began to have factions coming out of that. The ISWAP, Islamic State, West African Province, came out of that. We have the Ansaru, another faction. Then you have the Mahmuda, another faction. And in recent time, we have had addition of Lakurawa and JNIM that have joined this. And then, of course, you have the militias that suddenly appeared on our radar since 2014, 2015 to now. Now, these are the adversaries before us. Now, so the question then to ask is, are we tackling this knowing that these are the people we are dealing with and knowing what their intentions are? We have, some of them have been arrested. We saw judgment recently in court. What are the outcomes from all the interrogations that have taken place? What are their intentions? What do they want? Where did they come from? Who are they? Who are their sponsors? All of these have been there. We have had information about it, but we have not dealt with those.
Indeed.
And then we think that we can just push everything to the armed forces.
And if this is a political power tussle, General Yola, as you have said, it means that there is a bigger force behind these identities that you have enumerated. And are we acknowledging that there's a bigger force and, of course, rising up against this bigger force with equal firepower? I think the answer is clearly somewhere in the mix. General Henry Ayola, retired, is a former general with the Nigerian Armed Forces. Thank you so much, sir, for coming through on this particular very important conversation. Of course, we'll be back at it yet again.
Thank you, Bukola.
And so that's how it's been on the show today, and of course, the entire week. Thank you for being there all through the week. We'll be back again tomorrow. Do have yourselves a splendid weekend. I am Bukola Koka.
I'm Jeffrey Uzama. Bye-bye.
And I'm Kaido Kikile.